Today's college students and recent grads face greater financial pressures than earlier generations because so many are leaving school with heavy debt burdens. And once you're in the workplace, there are a host of financial decisions you need to make and wrong moves that can lead you astray. Today, we're going to share 10 tips on getting your finances off to a strong start. I'm Karen Damato, a Deputy Personal Finance Editor at the Wall Street Journal. I'm joined by Jason Zweig, who writes the journal's column, The Intelligent Investor, and Jonathan Clements, another journal columnist and author of the Jonathan Clements Money Guide 2015. So we have about 30 minutes that we'll be together today. We encourage you to send in questions. We're going to jump in and get to our 10 tips so that we'll have time at the end to take questions. Okay, tip number 1, nurture your credit score. Jonathan, you want to start us off on that one?
When I sent my kids out into the adult world, one of the things I made sure is they both got credit cards. And then what I encouraged them to do was to charge a very small amount every month and then make sure they pay off the balance in full. So what does that do? Well, by paying that credit card on a regular basis, you start to establish a credit history and hence a credit score. By charging only a relatively small amount, you're only using a relatively small percentage of your total available credit. That makes you look less financially stressed. Again, that's good for your credit score. And then the third point here is you've got to make sure that you pay off that bill on time, because timely payments is the #1 thing that influences your credit score.
Right. And another thing that people need to be thinking about now is making sure they pay their other bills on time for cell phone service, cable, your utilities if you're in an off-campus apartment, because there's a new credit scoring system that FICO is rolling out for people who don't have credit history, and that is based largely on if you pay your bills. So that's an important one. Number 2, see if family members can help with savings.
Yeah, I think this is a really important point, Karen, that often gets overlooked. You know, if you're having a tough time saving, whether you're in college or just out, you know, mom and dad have probably already helped you a lot, but they might be able to help you a little more. And if they can't, maybe grandma and grandpa can. They can fund a Roth IRA for you to the extent that you have some earned income. They can put the money in instead of you. If you're still in college or continuing education, you can get them to fund a 529 college savings plan for you as well. And the more money that they put in for you, the more money you will have down the road. And that can make a huge difference later in life. So just like my kids, don't be ashamed to ask mom and dad if they can lend a hand.
And that 529, that would be for the remaining years they have in undergrad, but it could also be for grad school,
correct.
Right?
Yep.
Okay.
One of the things you might want to mention to your parents, because they like it if you're behaving in a financially responsible way, you might say to them, hey, if I put in, you know, $2,500 into my Roth IRA this year, will you kick in another $2,500? Or similarly, if I put money into my 401k plan, will you match that contribution or subsidize that contribution? Parents love to see kids developing good financial habits. If you can prove that to your parents, they might be more than happy to help you out.
So you can decide, is it a better deal to do that this year when I have, say, $1,000 or $2,000 of summer income, or do I wait to do it when I'm in the workplace and there's more money at stake on my 401k, and maybe I'll get an even bigger match from mom and dad?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, number 3, and we had a number of the questions that came in were about how do I start investing? And our bottom line message is start investing simply and cheaply. So what does that mean?
Well, I think one of the most common mistakes that young people make is they invest like young people. And I'm a big believer, because that was my big mistake, that you should in fact invest like an older person. And the main reason is you're going to be an older person before you know it. And you don't want to have to go back and undo all the foolish mistakes you made, like me, when you were in your 20s. And so you don't want to own a lot of expensive mutual funds that throw off a lot of taxable income, because later in your life, when you're in a much higher tax bracket, you're going to look at all this and you're going to say, oh, what did I do? And then you're going to have a hard time undoing all the damage. In fact, some people never undo it. They just leave it there. So I'm a huge believer in a super simple 3-fund portfolio. You could buy a total U.S. stock market index fund, a total U.S. bond market index fund, a total international stock index fund. You can get them from firms like Vanguard, Schwab, iShares at very, very low cost, and sometimes with a very low account minimum as well. Schwab, for example, $100 a month will enable you to open the account with just $100, and then just leave it and keep it simple, and you won't have to undo it later. You can always add on later, but don't add on at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the other fund choices, if the three funds seems too complicated, you could always go for one of these target retirement date funds. These target retirement date funds are geared to a particular year when you're going to retire or thereabouts. So, you might be looking at the 2060 fund, if you're 20 years old today. And what you're getting with these funds is basically a one-fund solution. You're going to have a globally diversified portfolio within that single fund. You just, shovel in your $100, $200 a month, whatever you can afford. You do that for 10 or 15 years, and you're going to be amazed by how much money you accumulate.
Yeah, I think that is one of the things that people don't realize is if you start doing it and you ignore it, you just don't even look at it, and suddenly there are quite a few thousands of dollars there, and you don't feel like every one of those dollars was painful to you.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things when you're young, you say, well, I don't have any money, but the one thing you do have, which is equally valuable, is time. Time in the markets can do astounding things. I mean, if you're 20 or 25, you might be investing for the next 40 or 50 years. It's, you earn 6-7% a year, and you compound that over time. Your money is going to double at an extraordinary rate.
Yeah, and I would just add one super quick point to what Jonathan just said, which is the other thing is if you're young, above all else, what you really want to wish for is a bear market. You want the stock market to go down. In fact, you want it to go down like a rock. Because as Jonathan said, time is incredibly powerful, but the thing that's really rocket fuel when you're a young saver is a lousy market for the stock market. And if stocks go down, and they go down hard, and you're investing regularly every month, even if it's just a tiny amount, that's like putting rocket fuel in your tank, and 30 or 40 years down the road, you'll be amazed at the power of that.
The challenge there is a lot of people saw the market fall so sharply 2007 to 2009, and some people including young people, have reacted to that with just fear and feeling like the stock market is something I shouldn't go anywhere near. So I think there's really a hurdle to get over there in convincing yourself to get yourself to see the positive side of that bear market, because otherwise, if you only react in fear, then you could be missing the next 10 years, the down and subsequent up.
So what you have to understand is the fundamental irrationality there. I mean, people run screaming with excitement to the shopping mall every time there's a 50% off sale. And they run screaming with terror from the stock market every time there's a 50% off sale. In fact, like that person who heads to the stores on the day after Christmas to get the bargains, you should be thrilled if we get a 50% decline in stock prices. I dearly hope that I will get another opportunity like 2007 and 2009 before I reach retirement in order to once again buy shares at rock bottom prices.
However, probably not after.
Not after.
But that's for another webcast.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Number 4, make that smartphone earn its keep. So many of us spend so much of our time carrying a phone around, phone to our ears, phone in front of us. Make that technology work for you with your money. You can log into your bank account before you go shopping. See how much cash is in your account that you could pull out at the ATM or use your debit card to charge. You can arrange to get alerts when your balance is running very low and you need to stay away from the ATM or cash registers. You can use a budgeting app to track your spending. You can just get in the habit of checking your credit bills, your credit card bills, to see how much you've charged already in the month. Because like you were saying about trying to charge a little bit to your credit card every month, once you start pulling it out, sometimes that little bit becomes quite a bit. And you can look at your phone and just get that reminder of how much you have charged so far. You can use auto pay, set up auto pay to pay bills automatically. If you pay your bills online and you get a bill that comes in and you see, oh, it's not due for another 3 weeks, you can set that payment ahead of time. I'm a great believer in that one because I have sometimes missed the payment dates, and those fees really add up, and it's a bad habit to get into. So make the technology work for you. Stop me before I spend it all. This was from you, Jason.
Yes.
How are you going to help me with that one?
Well, it's easier said than done, I think. I mean, one of the difficulties of being a college student or coming out of college is, you know, you're just about to enter the workforce, or you just have entered the workforce, and everything is a temptation. Everything is sort of in front of you, and offers and websites are all sort of beeping spending temptations at you. And I think, you know, there are a couple of websites and apps you can install on your phone that might be able to help you with that. You know, one I happen to like is called stick.com, S-T-I-C-K.com, with a double K. And there you can make a commitment contract. You could rope in some of your friends, and you could say, you know, I have a real problem with, you know, chocolate or whatever it might be.
I plead guilty.
You know, I'm going to sign a contract, and we're all going to witness it. And if any of you catch me eating chocolate, then I have to do, you know, 50 push-ups in public, or pay each of you $10, whatever it might be. And the really key issue here is to recognize if you have a problem with spending, it's not going to go away if you stop thinking about it, or it's not going to go away if you try to stop it. You have to take actual action and restructure things and give yourself prompts. And technology can be really helpful on that front.
Can I make a suggestion for the people who are not so technologically competent, Jason? One of the great ways, if you think that you're spending too much, is simply to get a small notebook and write down everything that you spend. I know it sounds like a drag, but it has an incredible effect, because if you know that every time you go to Starbucks and you buy a coffee, or every time you go to a bar and you order a drink, you're going to write it down in that notebook, suddenly you become very, very conscious of what you're spending, and that in of itself will cause you to spend less. Another trick that I like is to forget the credit card. You can do your one monthly charge and then put it aside and spend cash. Yeah. Because when you spend with cash, it is so much more real than when you pay with a credit card. With a credit card, it's sort of like, we're not going to pay for that till later.
Right. And maybe there's one more trick, which is when you do spend cash, go to the bank, and instead of going to the ATM and getting 20s, I think most ATMs dispense $20 bills as a default, go to the teller and get a $100 bill instead. There's some research that suggests that if you carry around bigger bills, you become more reluctant to spend by breaking them.
And even if you want to, the merchant won't take them.
That's true. We're going to move on to some things that apply more as students graduate and move into the working world. Say yes to free money.
Yeah, this is about you get your first job and you get that chance to sign up for that 401k plan. And a lot of people say, oh, retirement, it's 4 decades away. There's so many other financial priorities that I have. And I would say if you have a chance to fund a 401k plan, especially a 401k plan with a company match, that should be your top financial priority every year, even higher than, say, paying off a credit card bill with a large balance. The reason is this: if, say, your employer offers you 50 cents on every dollar you contribute, that's like getting an instant 50% return on your money. You do not want to let that money pass. And in fact, if you do the math, you put money into a 401k plan, you get that 50 cent on the dollar match, and then you later leave your employer and you cash out the plan, even after paying the tax penalties and income taxes owed, you will still be ahead of the game. So if you possibly can, fund that 401k plan at least up to the point where you get the full company match.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, when you're in the workplace, there are all those other plans that your employer offers you, and you get bombarded with this material from the HR department that you don't really want to deal with. But there are those tax advantage plans that you can use to help pay for commuting expenses, for some of your medical costs, for child care later in life. And there are hassles involved in all of them, but there's a real potential savings there as well. So you should force yourself to pay attention to all that paperwork and sort through it and take advantage of the things that really can save you money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are very important side benefits, I think, Karen. You know, for anyone who commutes, for anyone who ever needs any kind of health care at all, and between those two, it's just about everybody, those benefits are valuable. And people have a tendency to let them slip, and that's a big mistake.
Number 7, favor Roth retirement accounts.
So if you're just studying the workforce and your income is relatively low, if you fund a conventional retirement account, like a traditional IRA, where you get that upfront tax deduction, the value of that tax deduction to you is going to be relatively small because you're in a low income tax bracket. You're much better off funding a Roth IRA. You won't get an initial tax deduction, but everything coming out of that account in retirement is going to be tax-free. So yeah, with my kids, I encourage both of them to put as much money into Roth IRAs as possible. And if you're your employer, you may discover there's also a Roth 401k plan, so you can also put money into that plan out of post-tax dollars, but it will grow tax-free, and that's enormously valuable.
And now, coming up to something that's front and center for so many of our students, prioritize your debts.
Clearly, if you have student loans, you have to make the minimum monthly payments on those every month. But what if you have additional money that you have free each month and you have additional debts? Where should you start? Well, you can simply array your debts from high cost to low cost, and what you'll discover is the highest cost debt you're going to have is almost certainly going to be credit card debt. So, if you have any spare cash, you should be paying down that credit card balance. Let's say your credit card debt is costing you 20% a year. There is no way you're going to earn 20% a year over the long haul in the financial markets. So paying down that credit card debt is one of the best investments you can make.
Yeah, and it's also a pure after-tax return as well. And I mean, if you got extremely lucky and took insane risks, you might be able to earn 20% for a while in the stock market, but you'd owe taxes on it.
That's true. And in fact, when you look at debt, one of the things you should also think about is whether the interest in that debt is tax deductible. Interest on credit card debt is not tax deductible. By contrast, you may be able to take a deduction for your student loan interest. You can also take a deduction once you get a mortgage on that interest. But credit card debt, there's no tax benefit to be had, and it's just a huge unnecessary cost.
Okay. Keep your fixed costs low.
Yeah, this is something that I've come to believe is one of the keys to financial success. A couple of decades ago, there was a famous book came out called The Millionaire Next Door. And The Millionaire Next Door basically told the story of how, there were these people out there in America who nobody realized were millionaires because they lived in small homes, they drove used cars, they got their clothes at JCPenney. But that was the reason that they were millionaires next door, because the fixed costs were so low that they could save great gobs of money. I realize, particularly if you're young, you move to a major city, rents are extraordinarily high. Still, to the extent you can keep your fixed costs low by finding an apartment with a low rent or sharing it with others. If you need a car, buying a used car rather than a new car. So you get your fixed costs low. That will have 3 beneficial effects. 1, you're going to be less financially stressed because you're going to have more of a financial cushion. 2, you're going to find it a lot easier to save every month because less of your paycheck is committed to these fixed costs. And third is you'll have more spare money for fun, for those discretionary expenses that we all enjoy. If you want to go out at the weekend and go bar hopping, it's going to be a lot easier if your rent is low.
And our 10th point is kind of related to that. It's to keep in mind that fun doesn't equal expensive. When you're in college and you don't have a lot of money in your pocket, you have a lot of fun usually. And I think it's really important for people to just make a mental note of all the fun that you can have at this point in your life without a lot of money, and carry that forward with you, because 5 or 10 years from now, you might actually have a decent paycheck, and you may see people around you who have even bigger paychecks who are starting to spend very heavily and have a lifestyle that you become envious of. And you can get caught up in that very quickly of feeling like you should be spending all this money. So it's really good to remember you can have a lot of fun without spending money. And I think that's really important as you go up the income levels, hopefully, to not feel like you have to bump up your spending as much or more than your salary goes up. To really just, think about, enjoy the things you can do cheaply so that when you do spend money, you're wise about how you spend it and you get a lot of value for what you spend, but you could still put a lot.
Right. And I hate to sound like an old guy with an audience, the kind of audience we have today, but self-control is a virtue, and thrift is a virtue. And if you think back to the great American heroes, people like Benjamin Franklin or Abraham Lincoln, you can really see those virtues on display in the stories of their lives. And to the extent that this generation can restore those virtues to American life that, frankly, our generation squandered.
A lousy job, yeah.
I think it'll help this generation get on its way maybe to being another greatest generation.
Okay, let's go and answer a few of the questions that have come in. One was someone who asked, you said earlier about a three-fund portfolio. Tell us again what those 3 funds would be.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, my basic recommendation would be to use index funds or exchange-traded funds that hold market indexes for all 3, and to make them as diversified as you possibly can. So you could get a total U.S. stock market index fund, a total international stock market index fund, and a total bond market index fund. Now, the one thing you might want to do is you might want to try to put the bonds in a tax-sheltered account so that they don't generate too much taxable income, because if you put them in a taxable account, just echoing what I was saying earlier, that's going to turn into a mistake that you'll have to fix later down the road when you're not in a 20-some tax bracket, but you're in a 40-some% tax bracket.
And a related question, because obviously you could put that in your Roth IRA, the bonds, but one of the other questions that came in is it better to save in a savings account or a Roth IRA? How do you do both?
Well, if you put the money in the Roth IRA, it is locked up, sort of. Actually, the Roth IRA is sort of a low-commitment investment.
Low-commitment relationship.
Right. It's one of my specialties, actually. If you put money, you know, the maximum for this year, $5,500 in a Roth IRA, you can actually pull that $5,500 out at any moment and owe no taxes and penalties. So in a sense, if you fund a Roth IRA, it can only be money for retirement, but if you have a financial emergency, you lose your job, the car breaks down, you can actually pull that money out and there are no bad tax consequences. So yeah, given a choice between a savings account and a Roth IRA, I'd go for the Roth IRA every time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Here's another question that came in. When is the right time, or is there a right time, to get a financial advisor?
Well, I think the right time is when you're faced with challenges in your financial life that you don't feel you know how to solve. And it's important also to be humble about what your abilities are to solve your financial problems. But if you're facing various complexities, and they could be tax-related, could be something involving saving for retirement, you might have sort of complexities in paying down your student debt. Any of those things could justify going to a financial advisor. But it's very important, I think, to make sure you see a financial advisor who is a fiduciary, which means the person has to put your interests ahead of his or her own, and extremely important to make sure the fees are fair. Ideally, especially for younger people, I would recommend seeing a financial advisor who charges fee for service, meaning, well, if I'm doing your taxes, I'll charge you $250, $500, $750 for that. If I'm building a financial plan for you, I'll charge you X amount for that, rather than someone who charges you a percentage of your total assets, which particularly for young people I think is problematic, but increasingly I think the industry is moving away from that.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just sort of pitch in there. As I see it, there's sort of two different financial problems. There's the, I don't know how to build a portfolio, and I, find it tough to hang tough when there are market declines. For that, we have this growing number of online financial advisors like Wealthfront and Rebalance IRA and Betterment. And these firms will manage your money for an extraordinarily small amount compared to what's been charged historically. Historically, percentage of asset advisors would charge 1% a year. Mm-hmm. And now you can get a lot of these online advisors and they'll charge you 0.25%, so 1/4 of what traditional advisors do. So those are a good option if you're having trouble on the investment front. Mm-hmm. If, on the other hand, you have a wider financial problem, let's say, you have problems with your student debt, or you're trying to figure out, can I really afford to buy a house? How do I juggle all these financial goals? Then you're going to be looking for a financial planner who's going to help you with these goals. And probably what you want to try and find is somebody who charges by the hour. It might be a very expensive hour. It might cost you anywhere from $300 to $450. But it's probably going to be cheaper in the long run than going to, say, a commission broker who's going to sell you a lot of mutual funds with a 5.5% upfront commission.
Okay, I think we're going to do one or two final questions as we're running out of time. What was your biggest financial mistake?
I think my biggest financial mistake was dating somebody who had a rock-bottom credit score. There's actually been a study of couples, and if there's a wide disparity in their credit score, they have a really bad one, you have a really good one, you're much more likely to break up. But also, money is a huge issue in relationships, and you really want to make sure that whoever you're involved with has similar financial values than you. And one trick, spend some time with their parents, because whatever the parents say about money, there's a good chance that your partner is going to echo those sentiments and behave in exactly the same way.
Yeah. I think my biggest financial mistake was when I was in my 20s. I over-diversified my IRA. Roths did not exist back then. This was back before the Civil War. And in those days, you know, a lot of people opened multiple IRAs. Each year, I would open a new IRA and put a new fund in it, put the money in a different fund. And I ended up with about a dozen mutual funds, all of which ended up with sort of being lousy. And the mistake was so bad that I still have it because I can't bring myself to face cleaning it up. But fortunately, at this point, it's turned into a fairly small percentage of my overall assets. So.
Okay. I will admit to a technology mutual fund bought in the dot-com bubble, but a small stake, and so in the big scheme of things, that's probably not the worst. I think the question we'll end with is another one from a reader. So when is a good time to start trading stocks?
I'll answer first, and I'll say the only acceptable time would be when you don't have the money to do it. And what I mean by that is try it first on paper. Trade in theory. Don't use real money. Do it for at least a year. Track every single trade you make, and be sure you count the losers as well as the winners. And at the end of that 1 year plus, see whether you're ahead or behind. Do not do what most people do, which is just jump right in and try it. First, figure out whether you're any good at it. And by the way, the answer almost certainly will be no, you're not very good at it. And maybe the short answer is never, but I don't know if Jonathan has a different view.
I think it's really important also for people just not to get into that habit of thinking, well, being an investor means buying stocks, trading stocks. It doesn't at all. You can get diversified, smart exposure with as little as one mutual fund or a portfolio of mutual funds or ETFs. That's real investing, even though it doesn't involve an individual stock.
And we all tend to be overly optimistic and overly self-confident. Those are good traits. That's what makes for happy people and actually for successful employees. But when it comes to the financial markets, it's a disaster. Right. You know, we all like to think we're better looking than average, smarter than average.
Well, we are.
We are. And on that note, we're going to say goodbye to our audience. Thank you for being with us. I'm Karen Damato from the Wall Street Journal, joined by my colleagues Jason Zweig and Jonathan Clements. Thank you, and thank you for watching us today.